welcome to another episode of Hard Lens Media. I still hear music.
Okay, sorry.
So today's episode, we have two special guests coming in. We have Krish Mohan, who's joining us here in the studio, as well as in the later hour, we have Justice Democratic nominee for 5th Illinois Congressional District, Sameena Mustafa. We have a lot of breaking stories to talk about, and also I'm proud to introduce the fact that we now have a website. Go to www.hardlensmedia.com, so that way you can learn more about our social media links, learn more about the team, and find us on our Patreon page.
I want to say it's been about a year in the making, but this was actually a lot, in a big part due to the patrons that have been helping us. The amount of money cost to run a website isn't all that cheap. It's not all that expensive, but it's some amount of money. We volunteer our time, so thank you to all our patrons who actually let us get enough money to actually be able to fund our website. So this was really the soul of you guys putting in that. To anyone else that hasn't supported us, check out our Patreon page. You can actually, if you're watching live stream right now, you could be sitting right there listening to us and talking to all of us between the breaks. We're trying to grow. We're trying to do what we can. But right now, kid, I'm going to throw it back to you.
Right, and I really hate mentioning this up, but we got to start the story off with a lot of heartbreaking news. First and foremost, the devastating Florida shooting that took place just this week. A troubled teenager named Nicholas Cruz used an AR-15, which is like a civilian version of the M16A2, A4, M4 carbine. He killed about 17 people at Majori Stoneman Douglas High School. It was on a Wednesday, and this has been another mass shooting here in the United States, something that this country is far too used to at this point. Of course, now it's gaining a lot of traction. There's a lot of people talking about gun regulation, mental health in this country. But we've covered stories like this before in the past, where there's a huge uproar. People demand something from Congress. Congress does nothing. We forget. We move on, and then it happens all over again. And how many lives need to be lost until something is effectively done? And unfortunately, this has to do with money in politics. The NRA has a huge amount of influence over Democratic and Republican elected officials. I mean, both sides get money from the NRA. I think right now the emotion can best be described from the woman who has to bury her 14-year-old daughter. It was on CNN, where she was basically screaming at President Trump and Congress to do something. I mean, how many people will have to be killed before something is officially done? I want to bring it onto the floor for all of you guys to mention this and to talk about it.
So 1.5 million dead over 50 years is simply a cost of business, so that a number of people, a few dozen, can make a very large amount of money selling firearms domestically. That's all this is. Yeah. Those people then take a portion of the profits that they make, and they pay elected officials to ensure that they can keep making those profits. Do we want people that are mentally ill to buy weapons? Yes, of course we do, because that'll increase the chance of a shooting happening, and then that'll make more people buy guns because they're scared. Do we want to have abusive people buy guns? Yeah, of course we do, because then more people will buy guns to defend themselves against those people. If you're at the NRA, and of course you take out all morality, all ability to view human life as something that's valid or important or anything of that nature, have inalienable rights as a U.S. citizen, killing people is simply terrific business. We've shown that abroad with the war in Iraq, other wars that we've been in. This is, from the point of view of us sitting here, of course, this is important. From the point of view of 80-90% of Americans, this is the same. But, a few people got to make money, and that's the message that the American government has showed us for 50 years, that's much more important than anything else.
And I just want to add, too, that this has been the 18th shooting since January 1st this year, the 18th school shooting. And it was also, it happened on the 10-year anniversary of the NIU shooting as well. It's difficult to watch those interviews with the students who lost their friends, their teachers, and a lot of them, has remained calm, but at the same time, I'm always on the fence when we have tragedies like this, because no, it shouldn't be used as a political way to kind of create chaos, but at the same time, thoughts and prayers, saying just thoughts and prayers is not enough, because this will happen again. And, if it wasn't Sandy Hook that did it, if it wasn't the Las Vegas shooter that did it, if it wasn't, just time and time again, what is going to do it? This is what you can do. Instead of taking this out on the NRA, vote these politicians out of their seats. Yep. Get involved and vote them out.
Yeah, and learn where your elected officials stand. And let's not forget, the general election for the 2018 midterm will end in November. That's nationwide. It's important to find out where your elected officials stand. So whether you're a Democrat, Republican, or independent voter, it's time for you to get involved, step up, and find out where these people stand. Because at the end of the day, we the people are the ones who are in control of our democracy, and it's time for us to take it back. So stand up and get involved. Don't be that person who says they wish they could have helped.
This school shooting situation is following an all too familiar cyclical pattern of, oh, this terrible thing happened, but it's too soon to talk about gun control, and we have to give them our thoughts and prayers, and we'll talk about that later. Now's not the time. It's too soon.
Yeah. When is the right time?
Yeah, particularly when we're seeing a major shooting like every week. Like it was a week and a half ago that Kentucky happened.
Yeah.
And what ends up happening, I see, is there's some capitulation to that, and we say, well, okay, let's not talk about broad gun control. Let's talk about some very specific aspect of it. So after Las Vegas, it was bump stocks. Oh, bump stocks are a problem. Blah, 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 blah. Mm-hmm. And it's like, where do people? Why don't we kind of have the guts to say, hey, I don't want guns in my society. Maybe it's time we talk about the Second Amendment. Can we overturn that? Can we, instead of arguing some very niche, small portion of maybe we need better background checks or maybe you shouldn't be able to buy some particular type of gun, how come we can't have the guts to say, I just don't want a society that has guns? Like, we're not even really...
That's a cultural problem more than anything.
Yeah, I think that's true.
I think the culture surrounding guns in the States compared to almost every other country is obsessive. It is the part of it. It's the fear that we need to be able to fight back because the revolution might happen again. There might be a king again. It's like, well, that's already in place,
yeah.
And they're the ones that keep funneling this argument over and over again. What needs to happen is we have to shift away from this culture of constant fear that we don't need to. Why do people want to buy guns? Why do you feel the need that you need to own a gun? Why did this kid feel like he needed to get an AR-15 and go and shoot 17 of his classmates? None of those questions are really being asked in order for us to figure out why the culture of guns is as obsessive as it is in this country. And a lot of that does have to do with the NRA and how much money they spend and how much money they want from gun sales. And fear is good business. And if fear is good business, then you are going to keep the cycle of fear going over and over and over again. So you have guys like Paul Ryan coming out and being like, oh, it's not the right time to talk about guns because we just had this shooting. And then we wait, and then nothing
There's
gets
another
done.
shooting, and then it's too soon to talk about it again.
Too soon again, and yeah, we keep rehashing this old thing. And it was very bizarre that after one of the largest shootings in the history of this country that we didn't really address what needs to be addressed, which is why are these semi-automatic and automatic weapons available for the public?
It was the same gun too.
It was a modified AR-15.
Yeah,
right?
a modified AR-15.
Yeah.
So what's interesting about this in a much broader sense is it's really not unique to guns. Guns are just very easy because they shoot things and it's very easy to do a cause effect. I would argue that the sugar industry has easily killed more people than the NRA could ever hope to. So what it really is a culture that's been developed within the U.S. in the last 40 years when corporations could buy politicians and the will of the people became kind of a moot point, where it isn't as much, I think, that it's anything specific. It's more categorically, if you're a corporation, you're simply more valuable and what you want and your profits are simply more valuable than human lives. Yeah. And the NRA is just a poignant example of that effect. Again, look at the sugar industry. I mean, look at the lack of regulation that was in cigarettes, and now because of lobbying, Even though it's there, it's not as much as it should be. Where things are regulated, where they aren't. We now are look at the pharmaceutical companies that I'm sure in 20 years will be relegated by regulations the same way we regulate tobacco presently. But, how many people have died because of opioids, and we've looked the other way because a small group of people needed to profit. In the end, these cases are just part of a bigger narrative of a couple dozen people need to make billions of dollars, and so what if a few thousand people die in that process?
It's exploitation. Sorry, go ahead.
Why do you think we see the American people defend the interests of power and business so frequently? Do people know, so when people defend guns or people defend these corporations, do they understand the economic flow? Or
do you know why we buy engagement rings?
Why?
Because of a marketing campaign by De Beers in the 1920s that people forgot about as a marketing campaign. So now you're a terrible person if you don't buy an engagement ring, even though it's still a marketing ploy that's lasted for many years on a rock that is really not worth that much money. Cubic zirconium is the real cost of what diamonds are. But because certain companies, De Beers, have monopolies like a cartel on diamonds, they can artificially inflate the price while keeping this kind of idea. It's marketing mixed with the ability to market, mixed with money, mixed with people in power, mixed with connections. It's a very, very expectable result for anything, whether it be guns, because now they have, through marketing, said, oh, if you want to be a real American has a gun. Now people say, well, I'm a real American, I must have a gun. A real American will eat and drink whatever he wants. So I like sugary drinks, so I'm going to eat and drink whatever I want. It's this same, and then you have the government, which of course is bought out, going along with that same message.
Yep.
So it's everyone around you. If you're someone that isn't truly understanding of how things work in the U.S., you're going to see your government tell you it's a good idea. You're going to see everyone around you tell it's a good idea because culturally it now works. And you're going to tell the marketing agencies, you're going to see what they say and see it's a good idea. And then you're going to hear some liberals yelling from New York telling you it's a bad idea. And that's the perspective that they have. So, of course, they're not going to believe it.
Yeah.
It's that this marketing campaign of, the only thing that can stop a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun. The
only
ability to
thing,
tell if that guy is truly a bad guy.
The only way to stop a bad guy with a grenade is a good guy with a grenade.
Yeah. Go ahead, Lauren.
And something that just is extremely disturbing too, watching the government essentially exploit the families and friends that have lost loved ones, and seeing how many of these politicians have accepted money from the NRA, and their response time and time again, just thoughts and prayers and pushing it off. It's too soon. We can't talk about it.
Until it happens
again, I'm going to keep profiting, and I'm going to keep telling these families thoughts and prayers, and I'm just going to get richer off of your loss. And it's probably one of the darkest facets of this country right now. And since it's such a sensitive topic, not just the tragedy itself, but people are very sensitive when it comes to the Second Amendment. And I think people need to, start looking at it from the perspective of the people that have lost loved ones. Why are the lives that were lost not as important as someone being able to buy an AR-15?
I also want to add in that in reality, there's only two groups that two groups that profit off of mass shootings: the gun lobby, as a response to this, people get scared and buy more guns, and news. You see on mainstream news, it's almost 24/7 coverage on a shooting because it's great for ratings.
Yeah.
The news makes money off the tragedy. The gun industry makes money off the tragedy. And the news industry, in that sense, just like they are with presidential elections, has a direct incentive to not have this cycle end. Because every time that there's a mass shooting that's newsworthy, they make some extra money.
Fear-mongering.
But have you observed viewers being desensitized when it comes to massacres like this?
Well, it's like I was saying earlier. There's a number of people that are, and I think it's moving. I mean, again, 80 to 90% of the population agrees that gun restrictions, that some form of regulation has to be put in place. But it doesn't matter. It doesn't really. For 40 years, it doesn't matter what the U.S. population thinks or wants or desires unless they have money to contribute to politicians.
But see,
that's just how it is.
the thing is, though, what's happening now, I think this will be the final word on this because we got to move on to a few other stories. One, social media is becoming a very powerful tool, and when you have young children, unfortunately, sharing on Twitter or Facebook or any other social media platform that, oh my God, there is a shooting happening in my school, and then you have people trying to coach them through, just, hey, stay down, don't move, wait till the police get in there to help you out. People are going to get tired of it because now everyone's being affected by it. Some people are saying, well, it's never going to happen to us. Well, believe it or not, with the rate things are going now in this country, everybody, whether we like it or not, and I'm afraid of this too, we are all going to deal with it at one point or another. And this is a horrible tragedy. And here in the richest, most powerful country in the world, we cannot take care of our own people, but yet the corporations and banks and Wall Street executives and the top 1% are protected. So we can't take care of the mentally ill or sick. We can't ensure there's enough regulations and protections to make sure, disturbed or horrible people cannot get a hold of these dangerous firearms that are designed to kill people. Mind you, the AR-15 is a civilian-designed weapon off of the M16, A4, and A2, and M4 carbine, okay? And those weapons are designed to kill people, not hunt. They are not designed for hunting or anything else. They are designed for assault and devastation. So other than that, we're probably going to hear another story like this. I doubt that this current Congress or this current presidential administration or the corporate Democrats are going to do anything about it. But the only way we can do something about it is by voting these people out, like Lauren said. So get involved. But other than that, we have to move on to another story. And we're going to basically be talking about the Vote Assyrian event. Daniel, you were there live streaming it. Can you just give us a quick short summary about what exactly happened there?
So this was an event that we got invited to in the last minute. It was a very large gathering of various people running for office all over the city. We had governor's candidates. We had Daniel Biss. We also had Chris Kennedy's brother attended.
Yeah, that was weird.
A lot of the attorney general candidates were there. We had some people running for the 8th district, Senate, 9th, 17th representational district. And there's a lot of people there. It was maybe besides a conference like the People's Summit, it was one of the most jam-packed events that I've been at. It was the first time that this group, Vote Assyrian, was hosting any event. And these are people that a lot of the group that they have is immigrated from Iraq because of the war. So it's a larger community than I thought it was that we had in Chicago walking in. I'm glad that there's a large group of Assyrians here. It's good that they have enough to get represented, enough to get governor candidates to show up. It was a very nice event, very nice layout. We have the live stream of that was about 3 hours long.
Yeah, the live stream can be found on the Heartlands Media Facebook page, and the HD version can be found on the Heartlands Media YouTube channel as well.
Yes.
And on March 20th is when the Illinois primary will happen. So if you're listening, if you live in the Cook County area, Chicagoland area, or even in Illinois as a whole, check out those 2 videos out, and maybe get informed of the candidates and find out maybe which one of these candidates has earned your respect and vote. And that's the only way I can say it, because we do have to move on to another very important story. I don't want to cut it short, so just check out on the Heartlands Media YouTube channel and Facebook page, because I want to introduce...
I would just want to throw into that. Check out the governor, Chris Kennedy's brother, and Daniel Biss. Just specific. I'm not going to say anything on it.
Yeah, you'll find out for yourselves. I mean, Daniel Biss did a great job, but Daniel Biss did a great job. I'll definitely state on that. But Chris Kennedy's brother, you find out.
We're not going to say anything.
But I want to introduce Chris and Andrew to Cook County and how things are done here in Chicago. Okay, because listen, I'm pretty sure you guys have been all over the road, and maybe sometimes here and there you might hear about corruption, and a few cities that have corruption. There's always stuff in New Jersey or New York, but Illinois is mentioned as well. And the one city that's always mentioned, or the one county that's always mentioned, is Cook County, the Chicagoland area. So let me tell you guys about Cook County's residential property tax. Its assessments are deeply unfair, as an independent study has confirmed. Cook County Assessor Joseph Barrios has been producing error-ridden property assessments that have effectively punished poor homeowners. Heartlands Media has done a lot of work in South Austin community, Northwest Side, Pilsen, and numerous other communities, Inglewood. And mostly these are communities of working class families, low-income families, people of color, and the one thing we always hear about is gentrification, how all these people are being displaced, and then their neighborhoods are being gentrified, and then the property value is too much, they can't stay there anymore, their schools are shut down. But hey, the corrupt officials here in Cook County have to do a good job, because basically, I just want everyone to note that Cook County officials released the study Thursday. This was an independent finding, and basically it was quietly released. But this explosive report comes as Joseph Barrios, who is our current Cook County assessor, is also the chairman of the Cook County Democratic Party, and he faces a well-funded primary challenge. And just to note, I want everyone to remember that the Cook County Democratic Party actually endorsed one of the governor candidates. Daniel, I forget, which one is it again?
His first name is like 2 letters or something.
J.B. Pritzker? Am I right?
Yeah,
okay.
that's the one.
Yeah. And so I know you guys are laughing, but this is what we have to deal with daily. We have to live with these corrupt officials. And so
it's remember we covered that story originally, and it was like, all the people went to a back room and decided JB, and we're like, oh, okay. That makes sense. That makes perfect sense.
See what happens.
We predicted
cigars,
that.
right?
But
delicious cigars.
But basically,
the Eyes Wide Shut party.
Yes, exactly.
Nice Chianti.
Yeah.
But here's something else that's interesting in the article, because it basically says that this study was done by the Virginia for the Civic Consulting Alliance, and it collaborates findings that was done by the Chicago Tribune's investigation to tax divide, which exposed widespread errors and inequities in residential assessments under Barrios from, get this, 2011 to 2015, and it also counters months of assertions from Barrios' office. Now, he was definitely really saying that his assessment process is sound, so he's doing a good job. But all of a sudden, all these investigative reports are showing that no, all the people who are from the low-income, working-class neighborhoods they're being screwed over.
It's incredibly regressive.
Oh, yes.
But Kit, we know that Barrios is a really good truth teller, and just half the city's lying. That's all it is.
Yeah, okay. And mind you, Cook County Board President Tony Perwickle, who is a Barrios ally, commissioned the independent study of residential assessments the same morning Barrios and his staff insisted to county commissioners in the aftermath of the tax divide that the office produced fair and accurate assessments. Now, look, we have done numerous reports and live streams in a lot of these neighborhoods that are being affected by gentrification as well as being unfairly taxed. We even had Joseph Barrios' primary challenger, Fritz Craigie, here in the studio, where he basically talked about the dangers of this current tax system and how the office of Joseph Barrios has screwed over the people here in the Chicagoland area, Cook County as a whole. So, homeowners are effectively losing their properties. Renters are suffering. Businesses are suffering. Schools are being shut down. And all the while, this is how Chicago politics are done. So I've introduced this article. And I think we all have some comment to say about the gentrification and the dangers of this current tax system that's being led by Joseph Barrios. Open the floor to you guys.
Yeah, I just want to tell all of our listeners and viewers, please read A Tax Divide. That series of the investigation with the Chicago Tribune and ProPublica is astonishing, and they follow the same protocols because they reached out with this this current investigation that Barrios recommended. They reached out to other national assessors, and they followed the same standards. Now, this is what's kind of fascinating, that there were 3 public interest law firms that are suing Barrios and his office for through the Cook County Circuit Court, alleging violations of state and federal civil rights and housing laws. The suit contends the county as residual property tax scheme is neither accurate nor uniform and is perpetuating institutional racism. Please read A Tax Divide. It's incredible.
So I want to add on to that. There's a very clear system that we've discovered through our work, and not just this, but also how it involves the TIF system.
Yeah, Tom Tresher, Chicago's Not Broke.
Yeah, their work together is very powerful. So here's the gist of it for people that haven't heard this before. So let's start with the TIF districts. There are over about 140 TIF districts in the city, all of which are interconnected, which means under TIF law you can move money from one to another. I'm sure that's not going to be an issue going down this story. Now, Emmanuel has basically complete control of how those TIF districts are moved. Now, the TIF funds draw from the same pool of property tax that would normally go to the education funding, the original idea of the TIFs. is that you can take money out of there and you can invest it locally so you can build up a business district with the idea that eventually it'll return an investment and better the town that it's in. The way that it's currently being used is as a slush fund that is at $1.5 billion, which is one reason. You can see all the schools that are being closed that we don't have money for because we pulled that money. So that money can go to, so let's say, Emmanuel runs for office again. I always give the example of Magic Johnson. It wouldn't really work in this case, but let's go with it. He gave about, $25,000 or $40,000 to Emmanuel. Now he has the CPS janitorial contract worth many, many millions of dollars. So in this case, you give money and you're a real estate person, which is a lot of people now. And you give that money, and then he'll go, oh, you want to build a luxury loft that you don't really truly need the investment for that you're going to make a killing off of? Well, let me subsidize that with $20 million of TIF money. And then you build that up, and then you get the lawyers that you have that are connected to Joe Barrios, the guy that we're talking about, Cook County Assessor, and you get them to go to Barrios and say, hey, this building isn't worth as much, so what does that look like? Well, you have Trump Tower, the bottom third of it, the largest portion. They argued that it was in subprime real estate. It's not a good area, right along the river, one of the nicest places in the entire city. So its property taxes dropped by 70%. And the Sears Tower, now Willis Tower, is worth on paper $1 billion, but it's only being taxed for $500 million. These are just two buildings. So if you take that difference of $500 million, 5% of that money has to be taken from someone else. So what happens, you go back to those same areas where those TIFs are on the west and south side that already have this gentrification, you have the money, and you increase their property taxes to fill that void that's been left by lowering the property taxes with those connected lawyers, and then you just keep running that entire cycle. So it siphons money off from poor areas, brings it to rich areas, and then has their costs drop and then offset back to poor areas, and then once those areas are low enough, you start moving in and building up in those areas because now it's good enough to build.
And I will even add on that the number of appeals because of these overassessed properties. Guess who also benefits that because he owns one of the largest law firms in Illinois?
Does his last name begin with a B?
It begins with an M. Michael Madigan.
Oh, our wonderful Speaker of the House.
As well as some other aldermen in Chicago, too, that have law firms that also benefit in the hundreds of millions. And I think Madigan's is more than $1 billion in profit because of these appeals.
And just so I want to bring our guests into this, just so that you guys know, the Madigans are one of the Chicago dynasties, Illinois dynasties that have a long political. He's the Illinois House Speaker. He has a long amount of influence here in Chicago and Illinois politics. He's been in power for like almost 34 years, 40 years plus. And so, gentlemen, now that you learned a little bit of things about Cook County and our wonderful system that we have here, what are your wonderful thoughts on our corrupt system?
Very quick on a clarification. When we talked to Craigie, he said that one thing that Barrios is doing is that they're not really there's a system that they should be following that's been laid out, that they have. It's a working model to correctly assess everyone's housing. They're doing it like we're if you send us a Freedom of Information request, they'll just bat it away with their hand and pretend it doesn't exist. Because what they're doing is they're going behind the scenes and just manually writing no, it shouldn't be 500,000, it should be 250,000, just writing and overriding things. So what Fred Tregi said is that he gets in, he has the ability to basically almost day one start the process of transferring what is now $300 million a year in property taxes that are on poor, low-income people that are moving out of the city and transfer it back to the places it should belong to. That's how a mess. So if you do the math and you say 5%, flip that 20 times, and it's a lot of value in this city that isn't where it should be.
It's corruption. So, gentlemen, what do you think about our wonderful Cook County system that we have here?
Sounds terrible.
Yeah. How many? I'd be curious to see if this is a pattern in other places, but they're not as big as Chicago and Cook County. It's like somewhere in the middle of Iowa, they're doing something like this too, and. Because if this is happening more and more and more, then it's going to be a lot easier to shed a light on it and see and say, but that we shouldn't be doing this, And I think a lot more people would be on board with that. But with it, and this is sort of typical of like how I think people think, because like Pittsburgh's the same way. It's divided into neighborhoods. So when something happens in one neighborhood, they're like, "Oh, I don't need to worry about it because I don't live there. It really sucks for those people, but I don't live there, so it's not my fight." So when you kind of hear it in this isolated area, like, "Oh, it's a Chicago issue," the rest of the country is like, "Well, whatever."
The problem is that Chicago's economy, just in its own little nutshell, is somehow even more profitable than some European countries. So something like this happening in the third largest, we have about 2.8 to 3 million people in Chicago.
That should be alarming.
Yeah.
Yes, and you're right. I bet it is happening in smaller cities and maybe even like local towns and whatnot. To this scale, though, the domino effect of this level of corruption, I think Cook County has, forgive me if I'm wrong, about 700,000 people living in Cook County.
Possibly.
Give or in like the residential areas, not like in the more downtown areas. But anyways, you have Chicago's own like GDP essentially, and that's going to affect the rest of the state too. And you see that in like the state budget. Rauner just proposed it, and I'll be going over that. And a lot of what he goes over is taxpayer dollars going towards pensions and education reform. So it's going to have a domino effect. And again,
God
vote him
forbid
out.
we learn.
Yeah, but I do want to add that one thing that's unique in Chicago's situation is how those offices, the power of those offices has been allocated over time. Yeah. You have Madigan again. He has a family dynasty that's in power.
Yeah.
If there's like 4 people in Illinois that have the most power, he's one of them.
Madigan, the Dailies.
40 years.
The Madigans, the Dailies, the Pritzkers, and I forget who the fourth one is. Probably the Kennedys, maybe.
And how many of Madigan's family?
I think most of it.
Lisa Madigan was the Attorney General.
And in Joseph Barrio's office, a majority of his family members are working for him.
Oh, yeah.
It's one of those that it's a fiefdom type thing where his entire extended family works in some area of Chicago government in some way, shape, or form.
And one other thing, too, just so you guys understand about Chicago itself, it's just not only a segregated city, it is a hyper-segregated city. And what I mean by this is, of course, you have the north and south side. The north side is more affluent, south side is more poor. But then when you look at the north side and south side individually, there are poor neighborhoods and well-to-do neighborhoods and some good neighborhoods. But even the north side has its own problems too. It's like Chicago is so heavily divided. When you really do a tour, let's say you're driving up from the north side, you see all the nice stuff, all the beautiful buildings, a grab-and-go taco, music stores. When you go all the way down to the south side, you see run-down buildings, pothole streets, abandoned schools, all that kind of stuff.
But further to that, this goes all the way back to the Chicago fire. This is how the city was designed. It's functioning. Everything that's happening around us is functioning precisely as intended. That's the other thing. These aren't bugs in the system. This is the system functioning normally. But the system isn't meant to serve Chicagoans the way cities are built. And we learned that this is something that's more or less universal to cities in the U.S., is they're designed to get rich people to come and spend money. That's the focus they're trying to do. So if you can,
they get out of there.
So if you can make nice condos for people and make it really nice for a rich white person to live here, that's exactly what's happening in Chicago right now. They don't care if they're pushing people out back into the suburbs, even though they pulled from people from the suburbs to the cities and they're not kicking them out. It's just this is the auxiliary force of people that we deal with. The city would say, kick them back and forth, and. But further to kid, it's not just north to south side. It's, again, you have a pocket where it's like, oh, that's the people that serve that other community live. They live in this pocket of. It's how the city is designed.
It's modern day redlining.
Yeah. It's. I don't know if you've heard of anything this extreme in the terms of.
We're number one.
There's 4
we humbled you guys
that are essentially running running a scam on the city.
No, it's not a scam. It's legally. It's a legal process. They're doing just fine.
Right.
It's all above board.
It's all above.
The system's working as it should.
The system working as it should, but the system runs as a legal scam.
Oh yeah.
So it's running as it should, but there are 4 people that are.
Well, it's more than that, but
There are
we
4 families.
we kind of mentioned some of the more well-known ones, but there's a
Okay.
couple other families too.
But I don't think I've ever heard of any city that has like.
It's almost
Do you know
a
what I
joke.
mean? Yeah,
Like
yeah.
Chicago corruption. Like, well, duh. Like, no,
Right.
seriously.
And I
it's
think
bad.
because of that, it becomes like this expected thing. So when you bring up the fact that Chicago is. They're fudging the numbers on property taxes. Everybody goes, well, of course, that's Chicago.
And here's the thing that's really interesting, the way you brought that up. This is the same argument you're describing. Same argument, different subject. We can go all the way back to guns. The same argument.
yeah.
People have been convinced that this is the way it is, so not to do anything, not realizing that, like in Fritz Kagi, if he has a very good chance of taking out Barrios.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
is enormous. Like until Sanders ran and gave a lot of people the idea of, oh, I can just run on ideas and that could be a thing that works. Now a lot of people are doing it. So you have this guy who had divested from a huge amount of money. He has a really well-funded campaign because he has the money to do so. He has the ability to do it because he's trying. Because like I've said over a year now, a lot of these systems at their core are nothing but paper tigers.
Yep, and exactly. And one final note, because I want to definitely give the floor to our guests now. 2019 is also when we have our municipal and city and county elections, as well as our mayoral elections. So if you think our current Cook County commissioners, aldermen, and even our wonderful mayor, to whom Hillary Clinton said in 2016 that he's doing a good job, if you think these guys are doing a good job, okay, fine. But if you are struggling in the city, if you're suffering in the city and you want to get actively involved, find out who your alderman is, who your Cook County commissioner is, and where our current mayor and these mayoral candidates who are challenging him, where they stand on the issues. Stand up and get involved, because your vote will matter. So
Ask them the very hard questions.
yes, exactly, and
They will dodge them.
Yes.
And make them answer it. That's the other part.
Yeah.
True. So that being said, Krish and Andrew, welcome to Hardlands Media.
Thank you.
Thank you for just getting here.
Yeah, thank you for getting here. but we're glad to have you guys here on our show. So I think for a lot of our viewing audience, our listeners, or perhaps learning about you guys for the first time, you're doing this road trip all across the country. So why don't you at least tell our audience members exactly what you guys are doing? How did this thing get started?
And Andrew and I. So I kind of heard about Andrew through the grapevine of touring and doing political, social commentary, comedy, and we ended up meeting in Indianapolis last August. So, and you just end up hanging out with people, and it's like, oh yeah, okay, we're pretty we're pretty similar, and like you just sit and talk about issues and philosophy and life forever. And then we just decided that it would benefit the both of us working on newer material, that if we went on tour together, it would not just make for a more cohesive show where we kind of have themes that touch on each other, but our styles are a little bit different. But it also, it'll benefit us because we can learn from each other and overall make the whole show a lot stronger. So
Yeah, we wanted to create a show from beginning to end that covers things that we think are important. So, the whole thing, every joke is about things that we care about, and so it's cool. And hopefully we draw people to the shows that have similar interests and read similar things, and their minds are occupied with similar thoughts.
Are you guys going to have a show here?
Yes,
tonight.
Tonight?
Actually,
Yeah.
where is it going to be at, real quick?
It's at North, on North Ave at 8 o'clock.
At Norris. Wait, that's the same spot where you also did with Lee Camp and a
Yeah.
few other comedians as well.
Yeah.
Oh,
That's the
wonderful.
same
spot.
Oh, that is
Really
actually
good.
an
What
awesome
time is
spot.
that at?
8 o'clock.
8 p.m.
Is it a similar format for your show? Do you sort of stand up one at a time, or do you flip flop? Or okay,
Yeah. So we have Arish Singh. He's going to be opening up the show, and then me and Andrew are.
He was at the last event, or am I thinking of someone else?
I don't think Arish was at the last event. Jonathan O'Donnell was the other one.
Yeah,
the other comic that was.
Maybe thinking of another.
Yeah.
No, you know what? Because we were actually there twice when you and Lee Camp and a few others were there.
wondering
So the first one I remember, it was you, Lee,
Yeah.
and there was another person. Then the
John
second
F.
one,
O'Donnell.
yeah.
Yeah.
And then
that's
Peter
one.
John Burns was hosted the very first time Lee came to At North. So that was 2016,
and then
2017.
yeah.
So 2016 was Peter, and then 2017 was John F. O'Donnell.
Okay.
Fantastic. All right.
Yeah.
But, I think, going across the country, you're probably seeing a lot of different neighborhoods, a lot of different states, and how each one is different than the other. But what are similar themes or things that you've seen while being on this road? Because you probably have seen a lot of, a lot of communities struggling and also seeing some good things as well. But why don't you at least let us know what you guys saw on the road?
Yeah, we've definitely seen a mixture of the two. The first portion of the tour was primarily the South, and they're economically struggling. Huntsville was doing great because of the arms industry.
Oh, boy.
And there you have it.
Yeah.
And it's-
Huntsville was honestly the nicest place we've been to. And,
Yeah.
but it's because there's pretty much every major weapons manufacturer resides there, and that all goes back to like World War II.
I think Northrop Grumman is the only one that doesn't have like offices specifically there. Like Lockheed Martin is there. The Department of Defense has its headquarters in Huntsville, Alabama.
You know, it's maybe one of the best named cities that's ever been, and ever will be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Huntsville.
But NASA's there, so like the city is full of these intellectuals and these scientists that, like I have a friend that lives in Huntsville and works for one of these companies, and he's sort of just like, I know what it is, like I know what they're doing, but it's like he's sort of trapped in that system of I have to put food on the table, and this is what's here, like so to me it's I never blame the people for doing that, but the corporations are basically using that aspect of like, oh, people have to eat and people care about their families and their kids, so we can get them to do whatever we want them to do as long as that's the element that we can kind of hold them
That's
to.
the carrot we can dangle.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
cognitive dissonance in that community is palpable. Just everywhere you go, you're like, whoa, man.
Yeah.
There's some
then-
real paradoxical thinking here.
But there's a lot of people especially in Huntsville, that are part of that younger generation that are like, how do we get out of this? Like, how do we still utilize our intelligence for something better?
I heard the drug cartels are looking for better formulas and stuff.
right.
Well, because I've seen some of your live streams where you're, doing some of your comedy acts, and you really are, challenging the current system. You're making people think outside the box. I mean, so when you're there and you're probably, you're doing your act in front of different audiences. I mean, are you getting the same reactions? Are people saying, "Oh yeah, that happens all the time," or is there any kind of like, "No, this is how things are. Your joke doesn't fully understand the real story." I mean, have you ever dealt with
I
anything
think it's
like
a matter
that?
of trust.
Yeah.
So much of comedy is about establishing some sort of trust, and you do that through your ability, your confidence on stage, and whether you're informed or empathetic, people pick up on those things. And I think when we're talking about all these politicians and people who speak in the mainstream media, those authority figures, they present an illusion and they lie. And I think when people see someone who is honest and somebody who's speaking through empathy, and that, like, that's the beautiful thing about comedy is that it operates outside of a traditional power structure. So yes, you're on a stage speaking to a crowd, but you're a part of the people. Like, there's no real separation between like my interests are the interests of the audience. Like, there's no real separation, whereas
there's also, I mean, and it's even in the sense of like how we get on stage is that we, in most of these venues, we're walking through the crowd, like we're coming out from the masses.
Yeah,
to
and we're
come up
sleeping
and
on
talk to you guys.
we're sleeping on the floors of the audience members' houses. Like, we're a part of the people.
Yeah. There's no luxury element to what we're doing, it's interesting in the sense that we were talking about the notion of control. Is there is no control for either one of us. We're going up there and talking about what we think is important and what we believe in, but there is a side of comedy, I think, that the power structure does want to control, right? We were talking about what's her name, Laura Ingraham. You know, the shut up and do whatever.
Yeah, did
that
you see
whole
this?
thing.
Yeah.
But that's the power structure getting nervous and saying, well, comedians and entertainers shouldn't be making points and talking about important things. To shut up and make me laugh.
The summary of her argument was pretty much shut up and dribble.
Yeah. And then when people called her out for that being a racist remark, she said, no. For the past 15 years, I've been telling all kinds of people to shut up.
Well, hey, at least she's being consistent. You know, I mean, there we go, consistency. And who says corporate media isn't consistent?
Yeah. But the thing is, like, people ask about political comedy. They go, oh, it must be so difficult or whatever. And it's like all comedy is political. All entertainment is political. The absence of a message is in itself political. So, you know,
choosing not to say something is political.
Yeah, so
it's social commentary.
Yeah.
So if you're doing a trivial kind of comedy that's not addressing any parts of the human condition or parts of society, power structures, that in itself is serving the interest of power because it's just kind of continuing the status quo of thought.
What I like to say is that if you don't vote, you're voting for whoever's in power. Your lack of voting, and even further, I would say I've held that. The only thing that's more relevant to life than politics is physics. That keeps you on the ground. I mean, it's the only thing with politics is just human society organizing power.
And you know what else? I mean, we have to be critical of our elected officials because let's look at the current job that they're doing. They got 11% job approval rating right now. I think it's falling down even further than 11%.
Is that federal?
Yeah, that's I think for our current
bullies
Congress.
are still more popular than Congress.
Exactly. There's a lot of things more popular in Congress, and it's important to note. Let's look at our elected officials and what they do. We have Nancy Pelosi who is screaming that Trump is a threat and a tyrant, and what does this corporate Democrat do? She allows the expansion of the Security Act, and she votes in favor of it. And then we have Jefferson.
Trump, you're going to take advantage of the thing, and you're taken by the Russians, and you're going to spy on us. Here's all the spying powers you could ever want.
And then we have Jefferson Beauregard Sessions III, who says if you smoke pot, you're a bad person, and he's going to supersede state law and state rights in order to impose federal law. So, I mean, I'm pretty sure you guys have a large field of dealing with our corrupt officials who are both Democrats and Republicans.
There's endless material.
Right. I think that's the most absurd thing that we've come up with is
you can't even make this up.
Yeah, yeah. I keep saying that I think the worst thing this administration has done is that it's killed satire.
Yeah.
Because they're just doing all the things that we were like, wouldn't it be funny if we built a wall, like a 2,000-mile wall, but like a see-through one, and everybody's like, yeah, no, that's not a reality.
That's ridiculous.
Good one, Donnie. No, I'm serious.
Do that.
Or replacing food stamps with Blue Apron boxes with Milky Way bars and Kit Kats and canned food. I mean,
that's the difficulty of political comedy in today's climate is that not only do you have to be informed to view things accurately, you can't just be right. You also have to be creative, and you have to. It's really really difficult. Where it's like you can't just go on stage and point out how corrupt things are or how hypocritical American culture is. You can't. That's not enough. You have to do something really creative.
It's so overt that it's no longer funny.
Yeah.
Exactly.
SNL, every once in a while, they kind of just hit it like right on the head. And there was one that they had where the woman, she was constantly getting Trump tweets, and she was starting to lose her mind because it was just constant, like, oh my God, what's happening now? What's happening now?
Right.
And it, like, I would definitely agree, especially the media too, they've become so obsessive, and it's like, this is our president, and he's obsessed with Twitter. How, like, not only
but
is
this... But it's all feeding into itself in the sense that he's obsessed with himself.
He's an egomaniac.
And, constantly being out into the public eye. And then once he's out in the public eye, that feeds right back into that because the public is like, look what he said.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, yeah, I got him. And now I'm going to keep... So it's this cycle that feeds into itself.
I would just say, what do you expect when you elect Barnum and Bailey?
Right.
I mean, it's literally... Of course Trump's on Twitter. It's Donald Trump. We've known who he is for 10 years.
This shouldn't be a surprise.
It's like, if you're like, well, what would Trump do if he was elected? Well, he'd probably try and build a wall. He'd probably say some really insensitive thing. Well, you got his presidency down.
Yeah, but see, Trump was so easy as a punching bag. But let's not forget that Hillary Clinton, during her campaign, she ran a terrible campaign. I'm pretty sure you guys had some material on that. And remember, she lost to him.
And don't forget, she also helped boost him from the start, because she needed an opponent.
The quote Pied Piper strategy.
Yeah.
Yes.
And mind you, the DNC establishment and Clinton campaign were working together to commit election fraud, to basically nominate her to be the nominee, and so.
And I want to tie this back to what you were saying too. People can pick up if someone is being genuine or if they're being dishonest, just that fake facade, And I unfortunately. Well, I mean, she has a terrible track record, but Hillary Clinton was one of those people, where you could see through the BS. And unfortunately, it cost, a lot of us an election. So, And now we have a 17-year-old Twitter-obsessed egomaniac, fearmonger. So,
do you think we'll shift back to, because America has always been obsessed with entertainment. It's, seeped into every corner of American culture. Do you think we will turn back to it? Is there a way to reverse? So Trump is fulfilling that role of entertainer. He's creating controversy. He's really part of the reason he was elected is because he's increasing ratings for all these news programs and all this stuff. So do you think we'll ever go back to a president that is not this wild and controversial?
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think there's a lot of things outside of that analysis that really, I think, have more impact on what's happening. So first, I'm going to give you a few different stats. So if you look at Doug Jones' election and it was in Alabama, and he just got elected, and everyone thought there's no way he can beat Roy Moore, even though Roy Moore was a child molester. That was still a close election. The point is, if you look at people voting that were under 35, and everyone that voted, I think it was 65% voted for Moore. So I look at that, I take that angle of it, and I say, well, if I look at all the people that are the generation that grew up on the internet, all the people that grew up on the internet, all the people that were connected to the greater world. So it used to be before the internet, you were connected to whatever your local community was and whatever that might be. But now everyone around the world is someone you know. So the world is closer, and I always hold that you can't really be any ism if you are truly friends with someone of that. The isms are true only if they're a caricature of reality, in a sense, a joke of reality. So if you're younger, that's kind of much less relevant to many more people. So that's one thing. So you look at what happened again with Sanders. You had a guy who no one knew about, who had no funding, again, that no one knew about, that started out a race with no media coverage at all, talking to a few dozen people in lawn chairs against one of the most well-known women in history, who had unlimited money, unlimited connection, unlimited power. She had the system rigged in her favor in the primary. She had all her people through every process. When I was in Iowa, I saw them cheat when they were doing the caucus. I had the people around me cheat. We were talking to Laura Chamberlain a couple weeks ago, she was talking about doing the similar things, how they were lying when they were counting ballots. So you take all that power, everything that happened, put that into perspective and say, and yet he just barely lost. So you look at that and you say, what's happening at that point? That's when the millennial generation, the new generation I was talking about earlier, that's the first time that it not only has its first taste of having the right demographic orientation of power, but it also has starting to get the money and the connectivity that comes with aging and building that in your life. So what I see is it's already over. We are currently in the death throes of a dying mentality organization that we're simply moving past, and this is just the last response of a dying animal to a large degree.
I think,
kicking and screaming.
So.
I do too. And I think that's the hope in it, is because I think a lot of people are looking at things like corporations that a lot of people put most of their chips into, and a lot of people were saying that this is the way to go, right? Like my parents still say that. My uncle will still say that. I don't think that's the case with people in our generation. Anybody within their mid-20s to late 30s, in that kind of age bracket, that listened to punk rock back in the day are kind of going back to those roots of like, screw it, let's sleep on people's floors and couches and go across the country and deliver a genuine message. There is this wave that if you are genuine and if you do care about something and you talk about that thing that you care about in the most passionate way that you can, there's going to be a group of people that will listen, right? In terms of comedy, I think comedy is shifting into that that kind of punk rocky world where people aren't looking to play these majestic theaters anymore. They're looking to play a place like At North, which is just this sort of hole in the wall in the middle of North Ave, right? Like, that's more fun, but that's also attracting the right group of people that can come out and enjoy a show like that, that want to see someone be true and genuine to that respect. So I think there is a shift, but there's always going to be work that needs to be done in order to get that shift to become a reality, because power structures are going to want to hold on to the status quo, and that's what we're kind of fighting in several different aspects.
All right, gentlemen, thank you so much. We're going to actually go into our second break real quick. Our first break. So to everyone listening, please stand by. We're going to take a short 5-minute break, and then we will return back to the second hour, bringing our next special guest, Sameena Mustafa, who is the nominee for the Justice Democrats, who's running for the 5th Illinois Congressional District. Peace, everyone.
Thanks.
Welcome back to Harlan's Media. You are listening to Harlan's Media on Q4 Radio Show. We are broadcasting live out of the Q4 Radio Studios. Harlan's Media airs every Saturday from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. Central Standard Time live on Q4 Radio. Check out www.q4radio to find out more about Q4 Radio Studios, the Q4 radio station, and Q4 radio projects. You can also listen to us on 1680 AM. Also on Harlan's Media, you can check out our live stream on the Harlan's Media Facebook page. We also have a website, www.hardlensmedia.com. That's HARDLENS media, media.com. And we are joined here now with Sameena Mustafa, who is joining us here at Harlan's Media. She is one of the candidates who's running for the 5th Illinois Congressional District. And mind you, I just want to note out to everyone that we have basically interviewed 3 out of the 4 candidates in the 5th Illinois Congressional District. That's including Steve Schwartzberg as well as Benjamin Thomas Wolf, save for one other candidate who is the incumbent who has not really responded to us. But basically, Sameena, thank you so much for joining Harlan's Media. Yeah. So I think for our viewing audience and our listeners, tell us a little bit about yourself and why you're running for the 5th Illinois Congressional District.
Yeah, so I've been in the district for over 30 years. I grew up actually in Edgebrook, which is in the northwest part of the district. My parents still live there. They've lived there for over 40 years. I saw what happened on November 8, 2016, as I saw the screen go from blue to red, and realized that it wasn't just a failure of humanity, it was a failure of democratic leadership. This was a race that we could have won if we had leaders who were in touch with the electorate. And so when I started looking at the people who represented me, and I started looking at Mike Quigley's record, I realized this was a guy who he wasn't aligned with the values of the district, and there are specific issues. Medicare for all, he does not support, he's not come out in support for that. Those are issues that are important to the district, and he's taken money, millions of dollars from corporate PACs and special interests, and he votes with them in mind. And I thought, this is an opportunity to bring a real progressive to a progressive district. This is what we need in Congress. We need someone who's going to be fearless and stand up for people and not corporations.
Now, in the aftermath of the 2016 general election cycle, the Justice Democrats came into existence because people got tired of corporate establishment Democrats. They got tired of neoliberalism, and the Justice Democrats have been fighting for progressive issues and progressive policies. So I think for this midterm race, and as a candidate that is not with the establishment, why is it important to reform the DNC? Because we've seen the corporate Democrats, specifically Nancy Pelosi, for example, voting to expand the Security Powers Act. Why is it important to basically ensure that the DNC is reformed?
Well, they're losing. I mean, since 2008, we've lost over 1,000 seats. There is a clear case to be made for new leadership. I mean, there are some things that Democratic leadership has done well. They've withstood some things. Nancy Pelosi is a good legislative negotiator, but when it comes to understanding the future of the party, the progressive future of the party, they're out of touch. And these recent sort of votes on Dreamers and DACA demonstrate how they're not only out of touch with the electorate, they're missing an opportunity to point out that, hey, we're in this DACA mess because of Trump. We're in this mess because of the Republicans. Trump created this. Why are they reacting and not leading? That's really that's the opportunity. And for me, it was really an honor to get the Justice Democrats endorsement because they looked at everyone who was running in this field. And I actually came to the race a little bit later than some of the other folks. And they saw, one, I had shared their values. I was pushing for the same policies, and I had the operation to defeat Quigley. That's really what's the opportunity here. Justice Democrats is an incredible platform. They've given me incredible resources, and it's been it's a really great alignment. And what we're finding is the message is resonating. Voters are excited about it, and Justice Democrats is there's 51 candidates now. It's incredible. It's a movement.
Now, it's also, this doesn't really relate to your race specifically, but has to deal with a bigger race here for local Illinois politics, and that's the governor's race. And recently you had a new member join your team due to the words said by J.B. Pritzker. Now, of course, her reaction was that those words offended her, they did not represent her values, and many people are feeling like corporate Democrats or establishment Democrats or those who get the support from establishment Democrats aren't really understanding the issues that are affecting low-income people, working-class communities, and people of color. Can you at least give us a short amount of details about what exactly that is done for your campaign in regards to community outreach?
Well, no, here's the thing. The reason why Kina joined our team, and we're really excited that she joined us, is that I was already running and had an operation like that. My team leads, and more than half of my team leads are women, and half of those are women of color. Mm-hmm. So she saw that. And I also, one thing she said to me, and she said to others, is that I reached out to her personally. We actually knew each other. I've been in the community. We actually were both on the United States of Women Galvanized team. So this is what happens when you have someone who is already embedded in the community, a community leader, and has the connections. We were known quantities to each other. She knew what my values were. I knew that she had integrity. So it was a perfect match. That's what the opportunity is when you have somebody who's in touch with the community and has a demonstrated commitment to the community.
Now, this is an issue that I like to talk about a lot on Heartland's media, and that's money in politics. And there's a clear lack of accountability in Congress. There are a few senators and representatives that do not take money from lobbyists, banks, corporations, or Wall Street. On your campaign website, one of your campaign platforms is campaign finance, and that we need to combat dark money and offer public financing to empower the next generation of leaders. Across the board, independent voters, Democratic voters, and even Republican voters want to get money out of politics. Right. What have you seen in your race so far with money in politics? And if elected, how will you address in the Congress the growing influence of money in politics?
Yeah, so that was a commitment I made even before I got the Justice Democrats endorsement, because I realized that people, you're right, Democrats and Republicans, this is something that people can agree on. They know that things like the NRA it's not just one issue, it's corrosive throughout our democracy. We can talk about the integrity of elections, but what about the integrity of our elected officials? They have none. They're voting with their donors in mind. Mike Quigley has voted for increased military spending. He's gotten money from Raytheon, Boeing, Northrop Grumman, General Dynamics, and he votes with their interests in mind. We need somebody who's is going to actually vote with the voters' interests and not voting to protect his donors. He's on the Appropriations Committee. He talks about that all the time. But every time you look at his votes, he votes for increased military spending every single time. And that's something that actually takes money away from things like Social Security, healthcare, education, things that the voters are talking to us about. We've been talking to thousands of voters, and those are the things that they care about. And when they realize that their representative has taken money from all of these, from big tobacco, from insurance companies, and doesn't support Medicare for all, that they're shocked, and they think, hey, we want a representative who represents us and shares our values and is not tainted by this money.
Mm-hmm. And just a quick follow-up. With the way our current system is, the person with the most money for their campaign usually wins, and thus their ads and platforms are heard more than a grassroots candidates. And it's clear that the impact of the Citizens United ruling, other rulings similar to it, have affected both parties. And as a candidate that's challenging the current incumbent seat, Mike Quigley, what do you want to say to critics who say that grassroots candidates cannot win?
Well, we've seen it all across the country. We're seeing a wave of progressive grassroots candidates winning. Look at what happened in Georgia. That guy Ossoff had so much money. He had so much money. But was he the right candidate? You can throw billions, millions of dollars at a bad candidate and you can't win. It's when you have people who are running that are connected with the community, are talking about the issues, and are in touch with the community on the issues, then you can win. You're seeing it across the country. In this case, we have somebody who has probably almost $1 million, almost half of it from corporate PACs and special interests. That's not a groundswell of local support. That is people seeing a guy who is willing to sell his vote in Congress. We have 100 volunteers calling voters. We have people who are coming out of the woodwork. We just sent a letter to voters to really demonstrate what's at stake in this race. And that resonates with people. They, like you said earlier about the effect of money in politics, people know that they want somebody to be on their side, and they're tired of basically rhetoric from both sides of the aisle.
Right. And so I want to return to another subject, too, that's, people might have forgot about, and that's the FCC ruling on net neutrality. And the FCC made this changing vote that could impact the way the American people use the Internet. In their ruling, they've made it clear that net neutrality is a hindrance and it stops competition. However, voters from all the political spectrums, Republicans and Democrats, activist groups, Internet tech companies, all agree that net neutrality must remain. Now, on your campaign website, it states about net neutrality, open and free Internet not only protects free speech, but also supports innovation and job creation. So I want to ask you, Sameena, what will be the consequence should net neutrality be removed, and what are the steps needed to make sure that it's protected from any future rulings?
Yeah, I mean, we're faced with something that is where corporations are essentially buying control of our democracy, they're buying control of the marketplace and shutting out competitors. And we're seeing consolidation on all levels. I mean, this also sort of, there's a corollary to this in the banking world. And you're seeing just major corporations shutting out competitors. And so to me, net neutrality is about giving innovators the opportunity. You wouldn't have a Google or a Facebook if we didn't have net neutrality. And the tragic thing about this is why we're in this mess is because of the Telecommunications Act of 1996. This is what sort of set us down this path. And that was something that was a direct result of the ideology that Mike Quigley ascribes to, which is a new Democrat third way, this ideology which is the centrism and deregulation and pushing towards the middle, which is dangerous in an environment where the GOP is so far to the right. This is why we need something like a constitutional amendment. We're going to need legislation to respond to it. There's a Congressional Review Act that can overturn the FCC ruling. But going forward, we'll probably need to move towards something that will protect net neutrality for the future.
All right. Well, then real quick then, in the aftermath of the 2016 presidential election, many voters have been critical of the Democratic Party. And this again returns to really how this party has been representing or doing its job since 2016. And there are a few organizations that are trying to reform it. Yet there is resistance from the establishment, and they still avoid embracing political policies that are similar to Senator Bernie Sanders. It has been revealed that the DNC is struggling with fundraising. It is not taking advantage of its recent wins from last year, and that many DNC leaders in Congress still remain close to Wall Street, the banks, and corporations, and not really coming up with alternatives other than resist Trump. And then, like Nancy Pelosi, she decides to expand the Security Powers Act. If elected, what will be your stance in regards to getting the message out to potential voters of what relief can be given to working class families, and what will you do to basically challenge DNC establishment leaders that are essentially tone deaf to what progressive and independent voters might want?
Yeah, so that's exactly why I'm running. One of the things I did shortly after the election was support Keith Ellison in his run for DNC chair. I mean, you probably covered that and saw what happened. That was clearly a grassroots effort to try to change the direction of the party. And the party is standing on the side of corporations and their donors and not voters. And what you're going to see is essentially creative destruction. You're going to see more especially, I'd say, the progressive and younger voters who are seeing, hey, we don't have the protections. We don't have things like a living wage. We're worried about student loans, like college for all. These bills that actually would affect us long term, that's mobilizing people, and they're thinking about, what's my future going to be? What are my opportunities? And this is a party that's not listening to me, that doesn't even really care about the issues that I care about. And we have an opportunity to change not only the leadership nationally, but also at all levels. I mean, this is something you're seeing. You're seeing grassroots organizations. You're seeing coalitions of people coming together to change our elected officials at all levels, and that's the opportunity. The leadership is attached to donors, and what we can do most importantly is vote. We have to vote. And if you have a progressive candidate that you want to support, get on the phones, knock on doors. That's how we're going to send a signal that money isn't going to control this our democracy, that it's really up to us.
So when say your volunteers are knocking on doors and telling them that there's another candidate in the race that's going to challenge Mike Quigley's seat, what has been the local community's reaction towards this? Because for a long time, Mike Quigley has won the past 2 election cycles, so I'm pretty sure people are kind of used to, oh well, it's Mike Quigley, he's going to win, just leave it alone. But then they see you challenging them, and they challenging him specifically. So what has been the community's reaction towards your campaign?
Well, just some history. He's never been challenged since he got the seat in 2009. So they haven't had a choice. So one, they're excited about having a choice. And when we reach out to them and say, hey, I'm pushing for Medicare for all and I want to get money out of politics, that message resonates. It's not, we're not taking people kicking and screaming saying, oh, we want you on your side. They're like, wow, I'm ready for this. This aligns with my values. There are some people who have actually said to me, I didn't know you could challenge Mike Quigley. This is a seat. The history of this seat is the machine seat in Congress. Dan Rostenkowski, we had for one term when he got indicted for mail fraud, we had a Republican there for one term. Then you had Rod Blagojevich, then you had Rahm Emanuel, and now Mike Quigley. This is the political Chicago machine establishment in that seat. It's time. This is a progressive. It's a D+20. It's actually a higher rated than even Jan Schakowsky's district. Wow. So the fact that we have such a progressive district and we have a centrist corporate Democrat in that seat is it just doesn't make any sense.
It's interesting that you mentioned that because earlier in the first hour we were talking about basically political families and the dynasties that control Chicago politics and Cook County politics as a whole, and how basically we have a system it's machine politics. We just keep on rolling through it because the system has been put in place, but no one has effectively challenged it. So that's really interesting that this seat is very important and has a long history of, well, Governor Rod Blagojevich, who's currently in jail right now, and then we have Mayor Rahm Emanuel, who's
actually two holders of this seat went to jail, Rostenkowski and Blagojevich.
Thank you for that.
I mean,
so
that's an unfortunate pedigree for this seat. And Quigley got his start working for a machine alderman, Bernie Hansen, in the 44th Ward. I mean, this was a guy who voted against Harold Washington. He was a block of 29 white aldermen that voted against Harold Washington consistently. It's in many ways what drew Barack Obama to Chicago was, well, he was inspired by Harold Washington. Hey, we could elect a black mayor in the city of Chicago, a progressive. That attracted a lot of people and attracted the most recent president. So, but he faced in some ways a lot of the same. It was a preview for what Obama faced in Washington, was people resisting him just because he was a black, bold progressive.
Right. And so now people are also talking about other issues that are kind of like affecting them, maybe not here in their specific community. Because let's say Chicago, we're pretty well to do with the change of seasons, weather patterns. Sometimes we have a dangerous snowstorm here and there. But, let's face it, climate change is an issue that most of the international community wants to address, and they're trying to come up with solutions so to make sure that their nations survive and thrive. Right. But scientists have also stated that they're seeing more intense storms and shifts in weather patterns that will greatly affect communities, and the Trump administration has basically removed all talk of climate change from its current system right now. And right now we're seeing like East Coast and Caribbean countries and states like Texas and, of course, the U.S. territory of Puerto Rico being affected by worse storms. So you are running on a platform to invest in research and innovation to save the planet for future generations, as stated on your webpage. So what does this investment plan look like, and how will it gain support even with the Trump administration still in office for 2 more years and the influence of the fossil fuel lobby in Washington, D.C.?
Yeah, no, it is. That's where it actually makes a difference to have somebody in the seat who actually is going to be bold on on environmental issues. This is something that I know Quigley has, stated he has support of the Sierra Club, that he's an environmentalist, he's the greenest member of Congress. But there's actually a bill that's in Congress right now called the OFF Act. And he's not a co-sponsor of that. It's one of the boldest pieces of economic legislation. It's about getting off of fossil fuels by 2035. That's something that we, if you were really an advocate for the environment, if you were really pushing for it, you would be co-sponsoring it. Also, the TPP. That was another bill that had the Sierra Club was actively fighting the Trans-Pacific Partnership, but he voted for fast track. And that's something that if you were really an advocate for the environment, why would you vote for that? This is how you build a movement. This is how you build change, is having people who actually stand for those values instead of sort of having the rhetoric and then voting another way.
Okay, and then in regards to another issue that's kind of affecting the United States as a whole, it's the tax plan that President Donald Trump and the GOP passed. We're all dealing with the fact that it's going to basically benefit the top 1%, and there's now a huge concern that a lot of our social programs are going to be cut. And now your platform states that we need to revamp the corporate and individual tax system to make sure the responsibility of investing in our country is more equitable. There's a possibility in which the 2018 midterms can change the current Congress. So with that, what will be your plan to undo the GOP tax plan and in turn bring up your tax plan in Congress?
Yeah, so that actually goes side by side with Medicare for All. The Medicare for All plan needs a progressive taxation to make the numbers work, and that's where another demonstration of where Mike Quigley is to the right of the district and aligned with the GOP. He wrote a report, Reinventing Government, one of his first big reports, and in that he calls for corporate tax cuts. And he says it's not about when we're going to cut taxes, but by how much. And some of the proposals he had actually are the same as what were in the GOP tax plan. If you look at the caucus, he's a part of the New Democrat Coalition. They're very much a kind of a pro-business, pro-tax cut mentality. So when you have somebody who's in that seat who actually is on the same page with the GOP and has been talking about things like budget deficits, it actually sets the stage for cutting social programs. And for example, there's a bill that Jan Schakowsky proposed about expanding Social Security. He hasn't co-sponsored that. That's something that affects not just voters in the district, affects people all across the country. And these are the kinds of things that are progressive economic issues that we need to have that represented in Congress. And right now we have somebody who's on the side of the GOP. Even though he may have voted against the tax plan, this is rhetoric he's been spouting for years and is still, in terms of his centrist mentality, is on the side of the GOP in terms of rhetoric.
And a quick follow-up in regard to health care. We've seen Senator Bernie Sanders holding rallies to bring up health care in the United States. He even did the very first town hall forum on Medicare for all, single payer, and basically one of the leading factors for rise of early deaths is basically like homelessness, drug addiction, and this is leading to an ever-rising cost of health care. And the Affordable Care Act is also at risk due to the GOP tax plan. So your platform is calling to basically keeping the ACA, but also leading into Medicare for all. So what is the importance of having Medicare for all, and why has there been so much resistance from both Democrats and Republicans, at least currently in Congress?
Right. So I think it goes back to the money in politics. I mean, if you look at specifically the Democratic leadership and Mike Quigley specifically, they're getting money from insurance company PACs, and so there's a resistance to changing the system because that's how they're benefiting from it by keeping the system the way it is. And one of Mike Quigley's big donors is a healthcare private equity partner. They want the system to stay the way it is, and they've said at various points there's been unclear rhetoric about whether they're for the public option or not. But the fact is, Medicare for all would be a game changer. People like Warren Buffett are even coming and saying it's time for single payer. This has broad support. 60% of Americans want a government-sponsored health plan. 52% of Democratic voters want Medicare for all. There is broad support for this plan, and it's growing all the time. When people understand what the opportunity is, you could save $400 to $600 billion a year, and that includes saving money on prescription drugs. Because with a single-payer system, you would have a stronger foundation to negotiate with drug companies. That's what the opportunity is. That would make it equitable for everyone, and there's a lot of resistance because there's a lot of money that's behind keeping the system. So pharma, insurance companies, they want the system to stay the way it is because they're making billions, trillions of dollars.
I've always said it takes only one bad day for someone to have to, a working class family member to basically have one bad day, and then they are dealing with financial ruin,
right.
The possibility of losing their home, losing their family, losing their job, and that's been one of the rising factors for homelessness. It's the fact that it's one bad day because they can't afford to go to the hospital, they can't
Absolutely.
afford to get a doctor's checkup. So that's pretty, it's pretty interesting that there's so much resistance towards single payer for all, and so you're basically going to fight for this, correct?
Yeah, that's to me that is one of those issues that it's so clear that not only do you have the base behind you, but there's an opportunity to change, transform our healthcare system. I mean, on some level, we had a situation with the ACA where we came to the table compromising. And we didn't need to. Obama had a mandate. I mean, there was an opportunity to really show leadership here, and there's a lot of resistance we basically sold out the plan to drug companies. There were a lot of things that could have been done differently. We need to protect what we have, but we're talking about the future. What I think is what's resonating with voters in general is the concept of what do we stand for and what's the future. So when you say things like a New Deal, that excites people. They're looking for the Democratic Party to have the leadership of FDR, of JFK, of LBJ. Where is this party headed? If we're talking the same, basically singing the same tune as the GOP of staying in the middle and working on the side of corporations, that's why voters aren't choosing the Democratic Party. That's why we lost the White House, and that's why we've lost Congress, and we're losing across the board. It's because there's not a clear mission, a clear message.
And it's quite clear that this 2018 midterm election cycle is really going to, play a huge role in how our current government's going to be run. Right. And on March 20th is when the Illinois primaries is going to happen. So essentially, for our viewers, our listeners who are going to perhaps share this and watch this on their social media, where can we, one, learn more about your campaign, and two, why do you stand out compared to the other four candidates who want to get the nomination?
Great. So I'll start with the second question first. So I have been really honored. The Justice Democrats looked at the entire field and decided to endorse me because of the values and the platform and the operation that I was bringing to the table. And I've been endorsed also by Northside Democracy for America, which in 2009 actually endorsed Quigley when he first ran. Mm-hmm. And we were able to flip the endorsement with 94% of their members voting for me. So, and since then we've also been endorsed by IVI-IPO, which, as I mentioned earlier, was actually helped get Harold Washington elected and endorsed Barack Obama in his first election win. So, and then lastly, I got endorsed by Americans for Democratic Action. So we're the clear choice is that our campaign is the message, we have the operation, and the opportunity for progressive leader is right here. And so if you want to learn more, you can go to SameenaForCongress.com. We're on social media. But if you go to Sameena, there's two E's in Sameena, by the way. So SAMEENA for Congress.com.
All right. Well, then it's very good to hear. All the best to you on your campaign.
Thanks so much.
We're hoping for perhaps another follow-up interview. Yeah. So, Sameena, Mustafa, thank you so much for joining us, and all the best.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me. All right.
Great. So, Lauren Hahn, we're going to basically start off with your story now for the Illinois. There's a recently happening with Governor Bruce Rauner's government proposal.
Yeah, he just on Valentine's Day. Actually, if you don't mind, if I could ask you, I don't know if you had the chance to watch Governor Bruce Rauner's budget proposal for next year, but he was talking a lot about pension reform and kind of switching a lot of that responsibility over to kind of reversing the evidence-based funding that we went through last year for education reform, and how a lot of the school districts should be covering like their teachers' pensions and whatnot, to the extent to where it's millions and millions of dollars that the local districts would then have to take over, as opposed to the state being responsible for. So I would highly recommend you guys checking that video out, because there were a lot of responses coming out of Springfield from Democrats and Republicans, kind of breaking down what could happen if his budget proposal for next year actually went through, and how much damage it could actually do as far as to the Illinois taxpayer. Because the way that he's phrasing it is that it's going to save the Illinois taxpayer a lot of money, and when in retrospect it's actually going to increase taxes. So I don't know if you have any opinions on his budget proposal.
Yeah, I mean, Rauner is somebody who I think of as he was our preview of Trump.
Yeah.
And that was, again, going back to a failure of Democratic leadership on the state level. Is that's how we got Trump, or we got Rauner, is because people lost confidence in the Democrats standing for people. And they said, we're just going to blow up the system. And that's how, and we're facing right now, this is obviously a very contested, I'm glad it's actually a competitive primary now, because I think people have to see, what is the opportunity for someone who's going to stand by working people. Right. We certainly don't have that with Rauner. That's his message. The fact that he signed HB 40 is probably the only thing that that he's done that has made any sense.
That's the Planned Parenthood.
Yeah. That's literally the only thing he's done that's made any sense. But all these other proposals, again, he's not thinking about people. The GOP can't control this rhetoric. This is where the Democrats could stand up and actually be the alternative.
Yeah, I agree.
Thank you so much,
Sameena.
Sameena.
Thanks so much.
Yeah,
right.
Thank you.
All right, so Lauren, why don't you go into a little bit more detail of what's exactly affecting the people of Illinois in regards to Governor Bruce Rauner and his current policy that he's trying to implement?
Well, I'll try to condense, because his address was about 40 minutes long, and then I'll kind of go over some of the responses that we had from a few senators after the address. So essentially, he singled out for major cuts to his two favorite targets, teachers' pension programs and public sector unions, saying each need to take more responsibility for their part in the state's financial troubles by accepting less state help and lower state subsidized health benefits. Or I'm sorry, sorry. My handwriting is terrible. It looks like a second grader's. So, but lower state subsidized health benefits. He called it a path to roll back the state's income tax rates by 0.25 percentage point, provided lawmakers enact pension changes to cut retirement benefits for state employees, a proposal that faces a certain court challenge. So, Rauner has, over his 4 years, he has definitely gotten some backlash from both sides of the aisle. And to be honest, I'm kind of excited to see how this governor's race is going to pan out. Because he's running again for another term, and there's a lot of backlash with this proposal for next year. Because when you break it down, even looking at his website, the numbers they're not really adding up. His proposal included $100 million in capital fund spending, $50 million to clean up the Quincy Veterans Home, which just had an additional 2 cases of Legionnaire's disease. And it's up to 13 lives that it's already claimed at this point. And he wants to shut down, now I'm blanking on the name of it. I'll come back to that. But essentially, he wants... It comes down to the pension reform versus the education reform. And this was something that I covered last summer when Springfield was going through education reform and trying to establish some kind of compromise when it comes to evidence-based funding. And CPS, the Chicago Public Schools, they were probably the biggest problem when it came to this compromise, because CPS has had to pay for their own teachers' pensions, and it took a lot of resources away from the schools. So they were trying to have it established in Illinois legislation that they would receive assistance for that because it was costing the schools so much. And across the board, Tony Sanders, he heads the District 46 out in Elgin. But he was also in Springfield this last for Rauner's address too, and he mentioned that there were even schools that didn't think they'd even be able to open last fall, and to now have education reform come back in and pretty much take up the responsibility of the pensions. It's just going back and forth just like it did months ago, and this is what Illinois has to look forward to for the next year. I don't know if you guys have any thoughts, but...
Well, the way I look at it, this is Governor Bruce Rauner policy 101.
Yep.
He's constantly been supporting, tax cuts as well as benefiting all of his corporate donors. He's right now he's still coming off the aftermath of the budgetary crisis between him and Speaker of the House Michael Madigan, and this governor's race is really going to determine the future of Illinois. I mean, the way I see it, and from all the evidence I've seen from other articles and news sources here in the state of Illinois, Governor Bruce Rauner, there is a possibility that he can have a second term. It all really depends on who the Democratic challenger is going to be, whether it's going to be Senator Daniel Biss, J.B. Pritzker, Chris Kennedy, or any of the other Democratic challengers. But it's really it's up to the voters right now in the state to determine who they want to represent them and how this basically the March 20th primary is going to turn out. Because mind you, Bruce Rauner also has a challenger as well for the Republican nomination as well. So Daniel, I know you wanted to mention something.
So we've been covering this 2018 midterm that's happening, and of course the primaries that are happening right now. I think what's the most important is always the primaries, because when you put up the Republican Democratic, you have a good idea who's going to win most of the time, but primaries are where you get to determine who those people are. So I'm interested to see what breakdown. I expect Rauner to clinch his primary, because Republicans in history, I've looked at them, that the incumbent generally, even more than a Democrat, will win their seat because of that mentality. But he did things that were very unpopular that his base isn't happy with him about. So will that be enough to take him over? I don't think it will. On the Democrat side, as we've talked about, Pritzker would be the Hillary Clinton of the race. Just so much baggage, so much money interest, so much.
This whole thing with Barrios. I mean, the fact that he's president of the Cook County Board of Democrats, the Democratic Party.
Right. I mean, that's what I'm saying. He has all those same traits that Hillary had, and she was ahead in the polls. So that's my general logic, is that with that, it would make sense that he would be able to, or not, maybe not make sense that he would definitely clinch it, but it would make sense that he has a good chance, like a flip of a coin chance of winning, which is
the
terrible.
Structural advantage.
Yeah, and it's bad when then if he loses, then who do we have but another kind of really rich, it's basically him on with another jacket on.
Yeah.
And so then again you have Kennedy, who again he has his brother now campaigning for him, which I think says a lot just on that alone, nothing else added. Let alone that his brother seemed very sporadic when I saw him at the Assyrian event.
Yeah.
So you have that, and I've always said that if it's between the two of them, they're both people with money and well-known names, but JB has more money, so that makes sense that he would beat Kennedy. And again, we're left with, can Biss, like Sanders, have that explosion of growth, and can it be fast enough to overtake JB? Currently, it looks very plausible.
Right.
It looks like he may. And if anything else comes about Pritzker, that could be it. I mean, he's very close to not winning the primary. I mean, it does seem like he's going to win everyone older, very much like Hillary did, and different. He was going to win a lot of the rural Democratic Illinois vote. I don't think Biss is going to...
Well, right now, if actually, I know we're kind of deviating off of Bruce Rauner, but if you look at the campaign between J.B. Pritzker and how he's running this primary right now up until March 20th, he's right now been targeting Senator Daniel Biss the most. He's been ignoring Chris Kennedy, who many for a long time were saying that he's a strong up-and-comer, he's a second-place guy, he can maybe possibly beat J.B., but J.B. Pritzker's campaign ads are not targeting Chris Kennedy. He's going after Senator Daniel Biss, especially this comes off the aftermath of the quote-unquote first debate between all 6 primary candidates.
And that's what I'm saying, that if it's talking about Rauner, you're really talking about the Democratic primary, because based on who they pick will determine if he gets to actually enact that policy, and more so than just what he has now, what he has in the future. Because we know exactly his playbook, the playbook of Rauner, is obvious. It's like, he's a Republican billionaire who's going to try and cut public spending and give tax breaks. Whoa, what a surprise. Mm-hmm. But that's what I'm saying. It's really who's going to face him off in the election is really the most important thing. And like you said, Biss has he has a chance. It's not as much of an uphill chance as it was a week ago,
No.
and much less than it was a month ago. But he still has to climb. If the election was still held today, I would still give the benefit to Pritzker to win. And like I was saying, I don't think Biss is going to take the rural area. I think if he gets a few more percentage points, that'd be great. Because last time they polled him, actually pretty recently, he only had like 2 or 3% of the outside of Cook County area.
Right.
And that's an issue that's a lot of people live out. It's sporadic, but a lot of people live out there. He was doing, I think, the best in the suburban Cook County, not the city. And at that point, he was behind the city. But then again, the tape of Pritzker basically making fun of all the black politicians came out after that. So that's going to be interesting because I think that in the end, Biss is going to have a majority of the city. I'm not sure how big a majority. I think he's going to have a much larger majority of the suburbs, but I don't think he's going to pull that much rurally.
Well,
So it's going to matter how much he gets in the city.
It really determines, too, because mind you, a lot of the Democratic voters across the state, especially in counties outside of Cook County, feel abandoned by the Democratic Party. When they see, establishment candidates run, they're like, no, these guys usually ignore us again. But perhaps there's a possibility that they might have heard of Senator Daniel Biss. They might have saw a radio ad, television ad, or maybe were on social media to find out more. Like, oh, there's another candidate besides Chris Kennedy or Pritzker. Because mind you, here in Chicago politics, we talked about last names having, a lot of influence and association with Cook County. That's Pritzker, Kennedy's, Clintons, Daley's, Madigan's, you name it. But here you have this one state senator from Evanston who's basically challenging the establishment system. So,
But
go ahead.
Here's my counter to that. Bernie Sanders, in a year, switched a 60-point gap. This is a month left. Mm-hmm. And that would mean that, let's say he doesn't get 60. Let's say we just get him to 22%, which is still just a fifth of the vote. That's a 20-point swing in a month. So if you break that, that's about 4 times faster growth than what Bernie Sanders had. I think if you're at 2%, the best thing you could ask for if you're Daniel Biss is that the rest of the Illinois doesn't vote in the Democratic primary. I mean,
well,
I don't know.
On the other side of the ticket, I'm curious about, we kind of said, oh, well, Rauner's the incumbent and he's likely to win, even though he is being primaried for the Republican ticket. But this tax plan, it really goes against even what his campaign rhetoric is.
Right.
And I think even conservative and GOP voters will see that. And so I wonder, is that going to hurt him more than we estimate?
That could, because here's the thing. You got to remember, during the budgetary crisis here in Illinois, it lasted for 2 years. And for a long time before it finally ended, he had the Illinois State Senate Republicans and House Representatives on his side until finally it was enough was enough. 2 years, social programs here in Illinois were suffering. People were leaving this state en masse. The state economy, the county economies were all suffering. Chicago was suffering as well, economically and socially. And it got to the point to where, at the end of the day, if you're a governor of the state, you are the man in charge, man or woman in charge of said state. And under your watch, if you're allowing this budgetary crisis to continue, you are going to lose support. And what happened? The Republican senators and House representatives in the Illinois state capitol broke with Bruce Rauner, and finally they got a budget to happen. They did it without
Which
him.
he vetoed.
Which he did veto. So again,
He's very proud of it.
So at the end of the day, I'm not saying that he has us in the bag. No, he doesn't. But there is a very good possibility that he doesn't get the Republican nomination. A lot of Republican voters and even the elected officials that said had enough with him. So I mean,
he wasn't good enough of a business manager to run the state.
Right, and at the end of the day, perhaps we might be dealing with a different candidate who's running under the Republican ticket. We'll find out during the March 20th primary in the aftermath. We'll find out who gets a Democratic nomination, who gets a Republican nomination, as well as we got to mention who gets a Libertarian nomination as well. So I mean, you got to count you got to count everyone in this race, and I think this race here in the state of Illinois and who gets a seat, who gets to become our governor will matter, especially after the primary.
And we need a governor that demands accountability and transparency. I mean, during his time as governor, I'm not saying he was the only one that caused, a budgetary impasse for almost 3 years. And the fact that when you have a state like Illinois, we host one of the largest cities in the country as well. It's very diverse just within however, what is it, like 300 to 400 miles in length? We have a lot of people in the state, about 11 million. So you have a very diverse group of people, and taxes are going to affect people from county to county. And this compromise that was passed last year, SB 9 and Senate Bill 6, a majority of these two bills revolved around pensions. And I just want to remind our viewers that Illinois, over those 2 to almost 3 years, our deficit grew to $14.6 billion. And a lot of it is backlog in pension costs. And now you have Rauner proposing for the taxpayer and local governments to make up for those costs. When people in Illinois they already had to deal with the increase from SB 6 that increased tax rates from 3.75% to 4.95%. So, and then that's not even including the increase in Cook County as well that also skyrocketed. So I think people, when you go to vote in the primary, check out all of the policies that each person running for governor, I mean, in a general, anyone who's running for any seat in Illinois, but especially for the governor's race, because Illinois is definitely on the downfall. I mean, we almost even became a junk status state, where we wouldn't even be able to borrow money from other states. And I feel like Rauner's kind of using that as a pawn to say, like, well, if we pass my proposal, it will give about $1 billion in relief to Illinois taxpayers. Okay, you throw that amount out there, but at the same time, what are they going to have to make that up in? Increased taxes in other areas, in their schools, in pensions for teachers. There's a trickle down effect, and you use one platform to say, oh, well, it's not going to cost you as much. Well, actually, it's going to cost them more.
Yeah, it goes back to this notion that it isn't really unique to either Democrats or Republicans, although for someone like Rauner, it's a little more extreme, that he still is treating the state like a business.
Yes.
That the state will do what he wants to make outcomes that he desires, and that everyone in the Republican Party are just his executive team or his
but
board.
They broke with him, though. That's the thing.
Well, but that's what I'm saying. That's why I'm sure he didn't see that coming. My point is, if he's running it like a business, these are the kind of outcomes. He's like, well, we're losing money here because I wanted to spend money here, so we have to cut it. What do we cut it for? Well, I've never been to a public school in my life, I would assume. So I'm going to take it from teachers. For him, it's probably not even like that. He's probably like, what's a large amount of money that is due? Wow, it's a huge amount from teachers' budgets, from the pensions.
Teachers that can barely afford supplies for their classrooms.
But together, it's a very large amount of money. And he's like, well, I could just take it out of that. That's how I see him thinking.
Yeah.
Versus how you should be thinking if you're running any level of government as an executive. It's like a child. You have to make sure that they have everything they need and grow and make sure they're not doing things they shouldn't. And it's just such a shame that, America, as it is now, we're stuck in this cycle where we're talking about things like this because government's been defined like business. Rauner's defined it like a business. Blagojevich used it for it's all these people and the system itself, going back to systems, that it draws people in that are corrupt are the ones that tend to stick in the system because the system is oriented for people to abuse it.
And I just want to add, too, the executive director of the Illinois Association of School Boards, Ben Schwarm, also stated shortly after Rauner's proposal that pensions are set by the legislature, not school districts. So my worry is that if this budget were to pass, it would reverse everything that we had finally settled on last year. And going back to the education reform, that wasn't even a part of Senate Bill 6 or 9 that passed during the 10-day special sessions that Springfield held, again, at $50,000 a day to the taxpayer. So education reform was tabled. It wasn't even until late August that a compromise was even finally passed. And this proposal could definitely reverse a lot of that. And again, to reiterate what it was. Sorry, are we running?
No, you're good. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Now, this education reform was a compromise that took a needed basis per school. Now, you have someone like Rauner that believed and is still fighting for taxpayer dollars to go towards charter schools, while we have schools like, I don't know, the 4 high schools in Inglewood that are closing down, but who cares about them? Let's have the taxes go towards these more affluent charter schools because that's what's important. So this compromise, it was on a needed basis, and they even provided a laundry list of all the schools and how much they would receive if the Senate bill passed, and then how much they would receive under Rauner's bill. And this was, last August. And in some cases, there were schools that would receive more, but that was because of the different property taxes in the area. So it really came down to like the poorer schools versus the more affluent schools, and under his proposals. So I feel like this just kind of reiterates for the 4th year in a row, we're just seeing the same status quo kind of rhetoric. And it's put the burden back on the taxpayer. What if the taxpayer is poor?
Right.
Then that's going to reflect in their school. That's going to reflect in their community, and you're going to tax them to the point to where they're now displaced.
Right, and so unfortunately, we got to cover. We have to end this segment of Hard Lens Media. I want to thank all our guests, Krish and Andrew, as well as Sameena, Mustafa, for being on our show. And real quick, Krish and Andrew, I know you guys have this whole tour happening across the country. So where can they find you guys on social media, your respective social media websites? Where can they find you to learn more about your tour?
My website is ramennoodlescomedy.com. It's RAMAN noodlescomedy.com. All our details are up there. The tour is called the Anti-Imperialism Nationwide Comedy Takeover.
All right. And Andrew, where can they find you?
AndrewFrankComedy.com and Andrew Frank on Facebook.
All right, fantastic. Krish and Andrew, thank you so much for joining Hard Lens Media. To all our viewing audience, thank you for tuning in. You can learn more about us on our new website, and if you like supporting us, check out our Patreon page. Your support helps us build more content and do more shows like this. So peace, everyone, and let's all do what we can to build a better future.